Sri Gurubhyo Namaha children, 11th standard children, we were seeing first lesson, first unit, first prose lesson about grandmother, isn't it? It has been written by Khushwant Singh and the portrait of the lady. So, okay, that lesson we have seen two parts and this is third part. We will go what had happened in the second part and then we will continue the class children. I hope you are well and healthy and you are enjoying the class. Okay children, we will see what it is. So, here in the previous part we found that grandma and the Khushwant Singh were just going together to the school, and when he was just going to the school, there he found that grandson was happily walking to the school and grandma also just packing the stale chapatis, and they were just going to school, and she left the grandson in the school, and the priest only was a teacher there, and they were seated in the temple veranda and they were learning lessons. And grandma, till she was just sitting inside the thing and she was just reading scripture, and as the class got over, she is just taking him home. By the time they both, the grandma and the grandson, Khushwant Singh and his grandmother, were just throwing the stale chapati to the dogs, and the dogs were fighting and barking, and they were just following them till their house. There was a fight between the dogs for the chapati, and they were eating on the way, and they were just following till they going to the home. So that there we stopped children. We will see what had happened in the next thing. Okay children, here when my parents were comfortably, already I said that the parents want to settle in the town, they don't want to be in the village, they want to be a city life. So they went, both the parents of Khushwant Singh went there to search a house and to settle down there. After settling down, they sent a word for grandma and the child, Khushwant Singh. It's clear to you? So you will see. When my parents were comfortably settled in the city, they sent for us, and that was a turning point in our friendship. Although we shared the same room, my grandmother no longer came to school with me. I used to go to an English school in a motor bus. There were no dogs in the streets, and she took to feeding sparrows in the in the courtyard of our city house. So here what had happened, when they were in the village, where they were both just going to the school, and grandma was taking him to the school and bringing him back to the home, and she was staying in the temple and just praying till he is coming. So this was a regular life in the village. But once they were settled in the city, he started going to an English school in a motor bus, and they both shared the room together, but no more traveling like how they were done in the city. In the village. So in the city the lifestyle was little different. So here the bus will come and pick him, and grandma has no other go, she will be staying at home. So there is no stray dogs, she was just feeding the stray dogs, and it is not possible in the situation. So when my parents were comfortably settled in the city, they sent for us, they sent word for them, and they also went. That was a turning point. It was a turning point. They both shared the room, but anymore grandma and the grandson, Khushwant Singh and his grandmother, was not going together to the school how they did in the village. It's clear children? Okay. So in our friendship, there was a turning point in our friendship. Although we shared the same room, my grandmother no longer came to school with me. So she doesn't go with them to the school because he was going in a school bus, motor bus. You used to go to an English school in a motor bus. There were no dogs in the streets. When he was used to go by a bus, so there is no dogs in the street. And she took to feeding sparrows. So there is no dogs, so she started feeding sparrows in the courtyard of a city house. In the city house there was a courtyard. In the courtyard she will be just feeding the sparrows. So instead of feeding the dogs, the stray dogs, so she started feeding the sparrows in the house, sitting in the courtyard. So it was a regular work for her. As the years rolled by, we saw less of. So as the years rolled by, they saw less of. So what had happened? Why less of? Why less of each other? For some time she continued to wake me up and get me ready for school. When I came back, she would ask me what the teacher had taught me. I would tell her English words and little things of the Western science and learning, the law of gravity, Archimedes' principle, the world being round, etc. This made her unhappy. She could not help me with my lessons. She did not believe in the things they taught at the English school and was distressed that there was no teaching about God and the scripture. One day I announced that we were being given music lessons. She said nothing, but her silence meant a disapproval. She rarely talked to me after that. Okay, so now what had happened? There was a distance between grandmother and the grandson. For a few days she was waking him to the school, how she had done in the village, so she was making him ready. But later it was not happening. When I came back, when the author came back from the school, she started asking what was the lesson taught for him, and he was explaining that I would tell her English words. The author would, the narrator, he will be telling, Khushwant Singh will be telling to his grandmother that he learnt English words and written things of Western science and learning, the law of gravity, Archimedes' principle, and the world being round. He was telling that the world being round, etc. This made her unhappy. So she felt unhappy by listening to the grandson saying this all. She could not help me with my lessons. So the grandmother was not able to help him anymore in his lessons. She did not believe in the things they taught at the English school. She doesn't believe the teaching that taught in the English school, because, and was distressed that there was no teaching about God and the scripture. She was little angry and disappointed that there is no religious teaching is taken place in the school, in an English medium school. So only science and facts and other things have been taught, English is taught, but no importance is given for the religious things and God and the scripture. So this was distress for her. And one day I announced that we were being given music lessons. She said nothing, but her silence meant disapproval. She rarely talked to me after that. So when grandson was telling that, Grandma, in our school there was a music, so she is not interested in that anymore, because there are spiritual thing and godly scripture is not, godly things and scripture is not taught. So she was not showing any interest at all. She kept silence. That silence shows that it is a disapproval. So sometimes somebody will be just arguing and they'll be saying that this is not that grumble will be there. But this grandma understood that something is happening, and she thought that it must be stopped by silence. So she had disapproval, but at the same time she kept silent. Okay. So then what happened? She rarely talked to me after that. So the talking also been stopped. Rarely only she was conversing with them. So as there is no importance given for the studies and godly scripture, so we were different. So for that she kept quiet and silent, and rarely she will be talking to him. When I went up to university, I was given a room of my own. So when till school days, studies was there, grandma and he was just sharing the room. So there will be some more words, sleep, come, like that, eat, and all like that, some words were there. Once he went to a university course, what happened? They have just stopped they have started two different rooms. So separate room had been given to the author. So their connectivity between both had been stopped. So grandma and the grandson was rarely meeting, and as he went to the higher studies, there was no connection between him and grandmother. The common link of friendship was snapped. Snapped means it got cut. So because they got two separate rooms and they were in two different rooms, and their talking and their relativity and the relationship and the conversation, that all become very, very less. And my grandmother accepted her circulation. So she accepted, she knows that he had grown up and he have to studying in university, so separate room must be given, and she had ready to accept that circulation, that separation she had accepted. With resignation, she rarely left her spinning wheel to talk to anyone. So she started spinning wheels. So you know that rarely left her spinning wheels to talk to anyone. She'll be just feeding the sparrow and spinning the wheel. That was the two work she used to do at home. And she rarely stopped that spinning, and she'll be talking to the children, or to the family members, or to anybody who is there. Very rare that is. From sunrise to sunset, she sat by her wheel spinning and reciting prayer. She will be spinning and reciting her prayer from day to evening, sunrise to sunset. That was her work. She will be reciting her prayers and she will be spinning the wheel. Only in the afternoon she relaxed for a while. So in the afternoon she will be relaxed for a while to feed the sparrows. While she sat in the veranda breaking the bread into little bits, hundreds of little birds collected round her, creating a veritable bedlam of the chirping. So here when she was started feeding, there was lot of sparrows just coming, and it will be sitting one on the shoulder, one on her, and it will be very near, and it will be just picking, and even she will not shoo the birds also. She will be just looking and taking care of it. Till this it is very clear, children. Okay, so she started feeding, sat in the veranda breaking the bread. So she will be just breaking the bread into little bits. She will be breaking all the breads into bread crumbs. She will be breaking, and hundreds of little birds collected round her, creating a veritable bedlam of chirping. So here a veritable bedlam of chirping. So there will be a lot of birds just making a sound. Some she smiled. So you can see how she is sitting. Some came and perched on her legs. Some will be coming and sitting on her leg, perched on her leg. Others on her shoulders. Some even sat on her head, and with frivolous So you can understand that when she was feeding the sparrows came and sat. Some sparrows on the leg, some on the shoulders, some on her head. So they were just sitting like that, and she was not shooing any of the birds. She smiled but never shooed them away. So she smiled at the birds and she never shooed the birds away. It used to be the happiest half an hour of the day for her. So she felt the life happiest moment of an hour when she was feeding the sparrow. So that was the happiest moment of half an hour for every day in her life. So she was just feeding the birds with the breadcrumbs. When I decided to go abroad, so the author decided to go to abroad for further studies. I was sure my grandmother would be upset. So he thought that surely grandmother will be upset when he is going abroad. I would be away for 5 years. So he'll be for 5 years he'll be away. And at her age one could never tell. But my grandmother could. She was not even sentimental. She came to leave me at the railway station but did not talk or show any emotion. Her lips moved in prayer, her mind was lost in prayer, her fingers were busy telling the beads of her rosary. Silently she kissed my forehead, and when I left I cherished the moist imprint as perhaps the last sign of physical contact between us. So here what happened when he was decided to go to abroad. The author decided to go to abroad for 5 years. He thought what the feeling of his grandmother would be. So she understood that his grandson must go for higher study to the abroad. So she had accepted, and she went and she was not even having any sentimental, and she was not having any emotional feeling, and she was not stopping him, and she was not saying that not to go like that. Nothing was happening. She came to leave. So she went to the airport and she was just giving a send off, or he was just going to the railway station and just giving a send off for him. She came to leave at me at railway station. So you have to board a thing, and you have to go first. You have to go in a train. So she went till the railway station and she just gave a send off, but did not talk or show any emotion. She doesn't show any emotion. She was just rotating the beads, and she was praying for a long time, and she was praying and she was silent, and at last her fingers were busy telling the beads of rosary. Silently, she kissed my forehead. At the last time when he was just moving, she kissed on his forehead, and it was the physical touch or contact between the grandson and the grandmother. That was the last physical touch, last sign of physical contact between us. I cherished the moist imprint. So he was realizing the imprint of the grandma's when she kissed him, as perhaps the last sign of physical touch, contact between us. So that was the last physical contact between grandma and the grandson. But that was not so. After 5 years, I came back home and was met by her at the station. So for 5 years, he had not seen his grandmother at all. Last, she bid a goodbye to him and she kissed him on his forehead. That was a physical contact for the 5 years. And after 5 years, when he returned, she came back home and was met by her at the station. Again, she was meeting, when he was just coming, she was meeting him at the railway station for the first time after 5 years. She did not look a day older. So she was not, 5 years had gone over, but there was not a olderness or what. She was same how we had seen 5 years before. The same grandmother was there. She still had no time for words. So in the return journey also, when they came back and from railway station to home they were going, she was not talking a word. And while she clasped me in her arms, so she clasped him in her arms, she was just holding him. I could hear her reciting a prayer. So he was just holding both of them and she was just reciting a prayer. Even on the first day of my arrival, her happiest moments were with her sparrows, whom she fed longer and with frivolous rebukes. So when our grandson Khushwant Singh came to his home, then also that half an hour which he gave for the sparrows feeding, it was the happiest moment she felt, and she was feeding the sparrows. With her sparrows, whom she fed longer and with frivolous rebukes. In the evening, a change came over her. So here is the thing. In the evening, there was a change in her. She did not pray. So right from 20 years when the grandson had seen, Khushwant Singh's son has seen his grandmother, he was looking at grandmother, regularly praying. Even when 5 years he is abroad, or he was just went away and he was not there, but that 5 years, all the days grandma was praying with the bead and spinning the wheel. But that day she collected the women of the neighborhood, got an old drum and started to sing. She went and collected the neighborhood women and she brought a drum and started to sing. She was started to sing. For several hours she thumbed the saving skins of the dilapidated drum and sang of the homecoming of warrior. You know that a poem called Homecoming of Warriors? So that song she was singing and she was just banging the drums and she was singing, and we had to persuade her to stop to avoid overstraining. That was the first time since I had known her that she did not pray. So the author noticed that was the first day in his life he saw that the grandmother had not prayed. So that was the day just drumming and thumbing the drum and just singing a song with the neighborhood woman. So that was the first time he had seen such things. Okay, so they stopped her that it must not be overstaying to her. That was the first time since I had known her that she did not pray. The next morning she was taken ill. So the whole night she was praying like that, and next day morning she was ill. It was mild fever and the doctor told. So it was a mild fever. She was feeling ill, and the next day morning noticed that the grandmother was not feeling well, and it was a mild fever. And the doctor told, what the doctor told? The doctor told us that it would go, but my grandmother thought differently. She told us that her end was near. She said that since only a few hours before the close of the last chapter of her life, she had omitted to pray. she was not going to waste any more time talking to us. So the grandma was knowing the vision that it was the last day of her, and she realized that, and she was telling, the doctor said it is a simple normal fever, she had. My grandmother was very clear of her vision, and she was telling that it was last time for her, and she doesn't want to disturb or talk with anybody, so she want to, since only a few hours before the close of a chapter, so that is the end of her, only few hours or few time is there left, so that time she want to spend with God. So she said that omitted to pray, a chapter of her life she had omitted to pray. She was not going to waste any more time talking to us. She said that she is not going to talk anymore of the time. We protested, but she ignored our protest. She lay peacefully in a bed praying and telling her beads. Even before we could suspect, her lips stopped moving and the rosary fell from her lifeless fingers. A peaceful pillar spread on her face, and we knew that she was dead. So the vision of the grandmother was very clear, and she was thinking that it was a last moment, and she stopped all the relation to talk, and she was just praying, and last beads praying was going on, and when her life was just separated, and just put the rosary down. So the rosary fell from her lifeless finger, and a peace just formed in her face, a pallor spread on her face, and we knew that she was dead. We lifted her off the bed, and as is customary laid her on the ground and covered her with a red shroud. So you know each person will be having their own customs, and here they have the custom of just covering in a red. Mostly the dead body will be covered with a white color cloth that is called shroud. So here red color, they were just, as they were Sikhs and Singhs, they were just covering with the red color cloth. And for her funeral, so arrangement was taken for her funeral. In the evening we went to her room with the crude stretcher to take her to the cremated. The sun was setting and had lit her room and veranda with a blast of golden light. We stopped halfway in the courtyard, all over the veranda and in her room, right up to where she lay dead and stiff wrapped in the shroud. Thousands of sparrows sat scattered on the floor. There was no stripping. We felt sorry for the birds, and my mother fetched some bread for them. She broke it into little crumbs the way my grandmother used to, and they threw it to them. The sparrow took no notice of the bread. When we carried my grandmother's corpse off, they flew away quietly. Next morning the sweeper swept the bread crumbs into the dustbin. So here what happened, the grandmother died and last funeral thing was happening, and the birds were till from the veranda till where grandmother was just lying, a dead body was lying, till there the birds were just gathered there, sparrows were there, and they were just not making any sound. They were sitting silently and watching what is happening. And mother thought that they came for the food, so mother took some bread pieces of Khushwant Singh's mother took some bread pieces, and she just made it into crumbs and she was just giving to the birds, throwing, and no bird noticed about the bread, and dead body was taken to the burial ground. At that time the birds all flew away, and next day morning the servant swept all the breadcrumbs on the ground. Okay children, so you understood that whether it is a human being or an animal, when somebody is loving somebody and their gratitude they'll be shown. Even the birds have the gratitude of the grandma. So here the Khushwant Singh had narrated the life of his grandmother till from his childhood till his death. He had explained. I think that you have understood the lesson, and you also having a grandmother, you take care of your grandmother, and how much love you are having, you just show, and you know that one day she will be separating from you, so you will be missing her till she is alive and your grandfather is alive. Just respect them and treat them and think that they are aged and they will be for a few years or something. So you have to be loving and caring and concerned, that must be there in you children, and you enjoy your life with your grandparents. Happy day for you all children. We will end up the lesson. Bye.